you to our session on working with the local media. We'll be getting started shortly, but I wanted to I think everyone's starting to get logged on. I'd like everyone to notice in the bottom of, if you're on the screen, if you're on the computer, towards the bottom right-hand corner, there's a white box where you can send in questions. If you have a question, please type the question in there. Just for presentations, it's easier if everyone goes on mute and except, of course, our speaker. And then I'll be able to field the questions and ask Matt to answer them as we go through. And I think it looks like most people are pretty much up on the audio. So I would like to welcome everyone to our session on working with local media, and to introduce our speaker, Matt DeRienzo, who is the Connecticut group editor of the Journal Register Company. Matt is currently responsible for all news gathering operations in the New Haven Register, the Connecticut Magazine, the Register Citizen, the Middletown Press, as well as weekly publications owned and operated by the company. Matt has experience at the very local level, as well as heading up the statewide organizations. He's previously served as the publisher of the Register Citizen and Foothills Media Group, and is publisher of Central Connecticut. He oversaw the Middletown Press, the West Hartford News, and the Housatonic Media Company, including the Litchfield County Times, which was named the Suburban Newspaper of America Newspapers of the Year for 2010. He's a finalist for the Associate Press Managing Editors Innovators of the Year Award, and of course he is a proud member of the board of the Diaper Bank of New Haven, Connecticut. So I'm very pleased to welcome Matt. Matt is going to be a font of knowledge on how to work with the local media, and I'd like to, without any further ado, turn it over to Matt.
All right, great. Hey, I appreciate being here. And please just, if you have questions, Allison, just like interrupt me and back and forth or whatever. That's the way that I work best. So shoot if you have a question or even a thought that you want to interject. Because one thing, as we get into this, that'll differ from place to place is what kind of local media you're working with. Whether you're in a bigger city or a small town or whatever, it can differ pretty radically. And so if there's questions customized to your experience that I can help with, I'm happy to try to. So, Allison, do we just want to go through these questions? Is that
sure? We could, yeah.
Okay.
So on the screen, we have some questions that we collected from a lot of you all, as well as our own experience, and we thought that these were a good place to start, asking the editor of all local media how you would address how best to get the Diaper Bank out in front of the local media.
Right. So, in general, newspapers, but also magazines, hyperlocal websites, local TV stations are looking for good human interest stories and profiles on a rainy day. And I got to say, the Diaper Bank concept is pretty, if they haven't covered you before, it's a pretty unique story, and it's a pretty interesting thing that would be a pretty easy sell. The question after they do that once and hopefully do a good job is, would they ever be interested in covering you again? And that's one of the challenges. Oh, we did that story. Yeah, that was novel 2 years ago when we wrote about that, and whatever. What else is new? So we can get into that a little bit, how to get the interest for that initial kind of story, but also kind of keeping your organization in the news, so to speak. And in terms of the human interest thing, in New Haven, for example, as Allison and Joanne would be familiar with, we have hundreds and hundreds of nonprofit organizations, and from a news person's perspective, we're kind of, to be blunt, we're kind of barely paying attention to that world and everything else that's going on, and it becomes relevant sometimes only when, honestly, someone's embezzled money, or there's a crime, or there's there's some reason that it goes over into the realm of quote-unquote hard news or whatever.
No, we're not encouraging you to do that to get attention.
Well, there was a question like down the page about, is any press good press, right? So so to get the attention and interest of someone who's kind of barely paying attention, the diaper bank has an advantage because it is a very specific, very interesting and somewhat unusual mission compared to nonprofits that have kind of more of a general or amorphous kind of like mission statement. It's a fun topic. So it's not a hard sell to begin with. One of the questions here is, how do you find out, who would be interested? What beat does the diaper bank fall into? Bigger publications will have possibly have a nonprofit beat, but I think that's probably pretty rare. So the question is, for a smaller publication, depending on whether you're serving a small town or a bigger city, it's a matter of connecting with a reporter or editor who is covering the geography that you cover. Before, what I would do before you, if possible, before you just call up cold or send a press release in cold and ask that they do this big feature story on your organization, is that you try to form relationships with that staff, and that starts by being a reader, or if it's TV, being a watcher, and paying attention to the kind of stories that they are covering and who's covering what. And so if you see a reporter covering issues of poverty and other nonprofits or other issues that are relevant to the organization or relevant to you personally, drop them an email with a compliment, or even better, and this will really get you in as a source forever, if you have information to help them break a story, if you know about that embezzlement. I'm just kidding, but probably not that, but hey, if you do, sure. But if you can steer them, if you can help them do their job and do them a favor, then you will become a trusted source on issues like that, and it will lead to good things and good coverage for your diaper bank. But that works a lot. If you establish some sort of relationship, and this is probably true for any kind of business or anything, and it's the same with the media. If you establish some sort of relationship in dialogue before you're asking for something, it goes over a lot better. But if you can help them with, if they're writing about poverty and you can help them steer them to like a great source of data on an ongoing topic that they're writing about, or tell them, hey, I know you're writing about this housing situation, just heads up, next week, there's, going to be, you're going to see some news about, this new thing related to that you might want, an advance notice of or whatever. That would work wonders. I would say don't limit yourself to just, the local daily newspaper or whatever in terms of what you're thinking. A great source of potential profiles on diaper banks would be if your local TV station has if they do they all do human interest type features. So if you can get that pitch to an assignment editor at a TV station, but also if you find out who the producers are of your local TV station's version of, most local TV stations do a version of a lifestyle program, like a Good Morning America thing, whether that runs at noon or in the morning. That's a perfect venue for talking about diaper bank. The way to get to know, writers at newspapers is to read their stuff, communicate with them. The way to get to know editors and producers at TV stations or at hyperlocal websites or regional magazines or whatever, there's a great new way to do that, which is to Twitter. Almost every single staff member, including like back and backroom producers at TV stations are now on Twitter. They have that presence where they're networking and communicating all the time. And if you can build a relationship with them that way and get to know what they're working on, and again, the same thing with the newspaper reporter, help them out if you can, or just be friendly, they will get to know you, and you'll have an in. One of the questions here was, what should I include in a press kit? I think the key is in terms of just be useful in terms of the information that they might need, instead of just throwing in every brochure and everything that you've ever produced. Useful stuff, if I was writing about a diaper bank, would be that handy kind of fact sheet on the stats that we like to throw around. Just really clear and good contact information. I know that sounds simple, but how they can reach you in various ways, phone number, email address, social media. A really brief kind of synopsis of what you do, kind of the elevator pitch in a prominent place, even on the front of the book, front of the kit. And then a list of upcoming events, so that if they're talking about, if they're thinking about maybe doing a feature on you, but they don't know what the hook is, if you include in that press kit a timely, updated list of upcoming events that you have, or even a mix of that with suggested times what they could write about it, like, hey, if you're looking for a Mother's Day story, this is perfect, if you're looking for a Father's Day story, this is perfect. And then the other thing is, press kits we have, they end up in a pile of envelopes on a desk, and can very easily end up in the trash. And it doesn't, I know this is going to sound cliche or whatever, or cutesy, but it really doesn't hurt to distinguish yourself some way by literally attaching a diaper to the front of it, or something. Probably some of you are more crafty than I would be, or more creative, but something like that, it gets right to the point of what we do, and it's the kind of thing that will be laughed about in the newsroom. Someone will pin it to someone's desk, and it will be a conversation point, and they'll kind of remember back to who brought it in. Or even better, a baby-themed or diaper-themed cupcakes or some sort of food item would go over even better than that. I know it's bribery, but it'll actually work. And if you're going to bring a food item, go down to the newsroom, ask to meet the editor, hand deliver that, introduce yourself, and don't ask for a story. Just introduce yourself and be it as like I'm bringing you cupcakes just to make the connection and get to know you and say hello. So because we've never met before, This question about if we aren't doing anything new, just day-to-day operations, what might be considered a story. Again, Mother's Day, Father's Day, specific events, all of those are opportunities to tell your story. And there's, as a male involved in the diaper bank movement, I think that's an undertold story that always can be a pitch. If you have a male board member or a client, even would be even better. That you can arrange to talk to the press, that would be a good story. So there's a lot of things like that, a lot of angles. Then I would look for anytime, be knowledgeable and read, as you probably already do, local press coverage of issues of poverty and all of these other areas that intersect with diaper banks, and help them, provide information to them. That's a little challenging because sometimes you're reading it after the fact, and it's not going to help their story if it's already written. But if you, complement that story, say, here's another aspect of it, here's a follow-up, whatever, and without being pushy but being helpful, you can become kind of the person that they call next when they're looking for back information on the next story, right? Especially if you can provide numbers and statistics And even better than that, if you can, and this is a challenging thing with, clients' desire for confidentiality or shyness or whatever, but if you can develop a stable of people, either at your agencies or whatever, who you can warm up to talking to the press, and you can be the go-to person that a reporter has that, like, hey, I need someone, I don't, I'm not interested in talking about diapers right now, but can you please help me? I'm on deadline. I need to have someone talk about heating oil. And if you can be the person that helps hook them up with people like that, that's an invaluable thing that will help your story over and over again. And again, that's about building that relationship with reporters and editors. Editorial board meeting. So an editorial board meeting, is what a lot of newspapers do as kind of a formal process in deciding what to literally editorialize about on the opinion pages, but it's also kind of the venue that they use to meet with outside organizations or political candidates. So say the Oil Dealers Association is trying to oppose a proposal for a new gas tax. They'll ask to meet with the editorial board to try to influence the editorial writing. And the board might include the editor, sometimes a couple of reporters or editorial writers. And literally, you sit on one side of the table, they sit on the other. You make your little speech about what you are, and they ask you questions. And the questions you'll get about diapers are the questions that you're used to getting. The cynical, like, isn't this just a bottomless pit of dirty diapers, and if we keep paying for people, then they will just keep having babies, et cetera, et cetera. All this kind of small-minded stuff that you don't get. But you know how to answer those questions, and it's a great opportunity to get those questions out there and dispel them in public and win over those editorial writers, because just like a human interest story, the day-to-day editorials that you see on the opinion page about the same old stuff get old, and pitching the idea of using the diaper issue as an editorial is a pretty can be a pretty cool change of pace for them. Plus, in most cases, you meet not only the editorial writers, but you meet some reporters and signing editors as well through that process. So that's actually a good way to introduce the organization to the whole news organization, and that can just establish that connection and that relationship again, so that and even in that meeting, you can talk about, hey, use us as a source. All the things I just said. Use us as a source. If you're looking for someone, like a real person, to talk about an issue of poverty, we can help hook you up with that. If you're looking for just like a local nonprofit leader to weigh in on something, and maybe sometimes that might be, and I think this was a question down below about good press, bad press, or whatever. It depends on what you want to be, but it will help your profile in the press anyway if you are not afraid of a leader and a voice for not just diapers, but for kind of nonprofits or on the issue of poverty. So if you're a person who is comfortable, as I know some on the line are, speaking out against the mayor's cuts to social service agencies in general, that's going to be a kind of thing that will be a valuable source or resource or a spokesperson that the press on that topic. It doesn't necessarily relate specifically to diapers, but it helps you build that relationship, helps the media.
So Matt, how would Diaper Bank go about setting up an editorial board? Do you simply call it and ask for the editor?
Yeah, I mean, it really is as simple as that, depending on the size of the paper. There's, our newspapers in Connecticut actually do not have dedicated editorial page editors, but at many newspapers, even our size, but definitely bigger, they do. So you would actually ask for the editorial page editor and go through them. and you have more of a chance to kind of get an in. You might end up meeting the editors of that process, but you have more of a chance to talk to them because that's their specific domain, and they have just like a little bit more time, you know. And the same thing, there was a question about how do I get my calendar of event in and how far in advance and stuff like that. The same thing there. Find out who at the newspaper or the publication handles the calendar and get to know them specifically. So if you're really going to be covering all bases and maximizing your media exposure with any given publication, like your typical daily newspaper, you'll want to get to know the editorial page editor and work through that process. You'll want to get to know the calendar editor and work through that process. And you'll want to get to know the reporters who are covering the kind of issues that relate to the organization. So it's not just probably one point of contact. You know, as far as preparing for the meeting, I think that's, you know, like I said, you know, just expect all those kind of questions. Don't feel like you need to, you know, be human and friendly, and don't feel like you need to, and try to be helpful. Don't feel like you need to go in and like give a speech, debate, be on the defensive, as opposed to going in and go in and get to know them, offer your assistance, find out about them, find out about what's going on with them. You know, it's kind of common sense, but it's just, I guess media are humans too, I guess. I actually just gave a speech on those lines the other night, which is kind of a funny, obvious thing to say, but.
So think of it more as a conversation than an interview. Yeah,
absolutely. And yeah, you know, and maybe this is because, you know, I'm in the media and ask questions for a living, but I think you can get your point across by asking them questions sometimes, you know. So don't come in and just, you know, let them draw the agenda, but find out what their approach. Ask them what their approach to covering nonprofits and poverty is. You know, find out what is driving them, and sometimes that can totally change your approach to the conversation. Because it might, you know, who knows? Depending on the publication, you might ferret out the fact that they are. And I hope I don't want to offend anybody by saying this, but they may be coming from an extreme right-wing viewpoint where they're angry at you and everyone else because you get a government grant. You know, who knows what off-the-wall kind of thing you might uncover. So it's good to know what you're dealing with, you know. So, and that kind of change. You know, there's other ways, even if they feel that way, there's other ways to get the diaper bank message across. But it's, you've got to ask questions to know that. So. And then, you know, and also if you're walking to an editorial board meeting, just like in dealing with a reporter, read their stuff and find out what they've been editorializing about. And you'll probably have some of those questions that I was suggesting you ask already answered if you're paying attention, you know. You know, and again, just like we talked about the press kit, bring a press kit to that meeting that has some of those stats and stuff like that so that they have good information to leave, you have good information to leave behind. So we ask here about what's the best use of social media to generate attention from the media. So it's probably a good time to make this point really clearly, that you are not 100% reliant on the media to tell your story. You can tell your own story. So if you're not using, to the fullest extent possible, free blogging software to write your own story, you know, social media to connect to people who are interested in the topic and to connect them to what you're writing about, that's just a no-brainer. So be on Twitter, be on Facebook, be on Google+, not because there's a lot of interaction, but because it increases your search engine ranking of what you're writing about. Experiment with Tumblr. Use Pinterest in part because you know, some of the the people who like Pinterest the most will be natural supporters of this effort. You know, just experiment with and use every feature that you can. And I'm going to get you know, there's lots of tips and tools and guidebooks to how to do all that, and that I'm sure you guys are up on, but I will get Allison some of my favorite kind of, and some of our own company resources on that if it's helpful. And so, in terms of interacting with media on social media, so you can go directly to the people that you're trying to reach that way by finding the right followers, following them, and getting followed back. But on social media, the same thing is akin to like reading a reporter's story and dropping them an email saying, hey, thanks for bringing attention to this issue of poverty. Let me know if I can help you or whatever. The same thing on social media. So if there's a story like that that is relevant to your followers or to you, or you think is well done, tweet about it and put an @ mention of the newspaper or publication that wrote it, their handle in it, so that they're tagged, whether that's on Twitter or Facebook, and then look for the specific handles of the reporters who wrote it, and kind of don't miss this story about like heating oil assistance, the value of heating oil assistance in Greater New Haven, and and tag written by John Smith, and tag his Facebook handle or his Twitter handle, so that he knows that you're out there promoting his work, and that just goes a long way. Or reporters increasingly, if you're following the right people, and I would suggest you just follow every media person you can that in your area. They increasingly will use Twitter or Facebook to put out queries saying, I'm working on a story about the cold snap and the shortage of heating oil assistance. Anyone have this personal experience? If you're paying attention to that, you can kind of like respond to those queries and be helpful. Or if you can't personally, try to make a couple phone calls for them and help them do their job. And again, that'll go a long way. So do press releases work? Yes and no. So I think they don't work as well in a vacuum. So if you're just sending them, we were just talking about this in terms of like we have a, as many of you guys probably do, we have a email blast service that we market to advertisers to sponsor, and we talked about actually kicking people off, recipients off, if they've never opened them, so that our advertisers know that 80% of the people who get those emails actually open them and read them and use them. So if you're just churning out press releases to 50 people, but you don't know if any of them are using them, or only 5% of them use them, it's time to rethink that and know and have a relationship with who is on the receiving end of them. And in terms of just even blind, having them work better, have something to actually say, like news. We just announced this, or we are going to be doing this, or whatever. Get right to the point in the very beginning. Leave out what's not important. Get specifics with facts and figures, and cite what that stuff is from. You kind of have to almost think like a reporter, I guess, in terms of what they would want. Be really, really clear with basic stuff like who you call to get information. If you have to really work to find that, or it's opaque, or there's not a phone number, people just won't bother with it. There's the limit. There's not really a limit, but I mean, common sense would tell you if you're sending one a day, people will get, will just tune you out, I guess. So, or even if you're sending 10 a month versus 5 a month, if they know that every time they get one is going to be super valuable to them or relevant, then that's more effective than sending 10, I guess. How far in advance? You know, it really, again, depends on the nature of it. For events, it's just really key to, you know, I'd say a month to six weeks for events, but it's really key to find out. Calendar editors at newspapers, for example, are some of the most particular and angry people in the world. And so it's important just to, you know, if you call them, if you can get them and say, what can I do to make your life easier? I know that you probably get stuff all the time that's in the wrong format and you just have to retype and it doesn't fit to what you want, or it's always continually a week later than you wanted, or it's 2 weeks too early. You tell me, what can I do to help you? You know, and of course, in the process, I get my calendar item in, and they will really appreciate that, especially if you follow through and adjust accordingly. So how do I get the list of people a reporter might call on? How do I get on that list? I think we've covered that. Is all press really good press? No, don't, you know, but the what I would stress there is, if you, I personally, if you're confronted with a bad press situation, and that might be as simple as just not according to your talking points, right? Someone wants to talk to you about the fact that, you know, your funding was just cut. To me, you can always, there's always the opportunity there to spin that into a positive for you. Sometimes that's just by your tone. Like if people see you, if readers see you and the press sees you as just being honest and forthright and hitting something head on and being transparent, it just improves their trust in you and the organization. And also, it makes a reporter feel like that you're a straight shooter that isn't just out to spin you and try to get something out of you, but is actually a pretty good source and a friend or whatever, you know. The best times to contact reporters, not Friday afternoon, not late afternoon in terms of a daily newspaper reporter anyway. Is, again, just get to know the reporters and editors and find out from them. You know, TV will be on a different schedule. For a daily newspaper, 10 or 11 a.m., Tuesday through Friday would be good. You know, don't hit them first thing Monday morning and don't hit them last thing Friday afternoon. And then around 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, things get really busy and deadlines start hitting and stuff like that. How can I help clients prepare to talk with the media? I think that's just helping them overcome their fear of putting themselves out there, but also just really, it's really more about finding the right people to talk, because if they're not comfortable for some reason, and for God's sake, if there's some safety reason, like an ex-boyfriend after them, or if they end up in the newspaper, they're going to have 10 debt collectors after them. You know, you got to pick things the right way. But if they have nothing to lose by talking, it's just a matter of reassurance and possibly, talking to the reporter about, I've got this person, so can you tell me how you operate and what your ground rules are, so that I can help convey that to them and warm them up to it. And the reporter will really appreciate that. But most reporters will spend some time with you talking about that, if that makes any sense.
Matt, on the subject of how to get on the list of who a reporter might call about an issue related to diapers, I just want to remind you that one of the things that was great for the diaper bank, and I recognize as a board member, was the editorial that the Canadian Register had put out, which you were quick to refute and say this is kind of nuts. The diaper bank in New Haven, for those that don't know, Joanne Goldblum had been named the Register Register Person of the Year, and then a few months later, after the Diaper Act was introduced in Congress, there was a very heated, angry editorial in the New Haven Register blasting the idea of diaper banks and giving out diapers to families in need. And Matt just jumped to our defense and was a champion for the cause.
Well, that's a good point that we kind of skipped over in terms of like when you're talking about, I was just talking about telling your own story on a blog or something like that. Submitting it, getting to know those editorial page editors and saying, when some issue of poverty or just randomly writing about the diaper issue, and Joanne Goldblum does a great job about this at Huffington Post and other places, is to write that. Write an op-ed piece yourself and submit it, or a letter to the editor, but an op-ed piece will be featured kind of more prominently, definitely to rebut something, but even just proactively to highlight that issue. And that you're going to get the nasty comments or whatever, and I would not shy away from respectfully engaging in a dialogue about that. And, because you're never going to overcome people's resistance to this is my opinion here, but you're never going to overcome the resistance to support for the issue or winning the hearts and minds of people unless you hear those objections and kind of refute them. And you do that, if you do that in that public forum, then the other people who have those objections but are not voicing them see that, and they see the dialogue and they hear both sides. If that makes any sense.
I think that makes. I mean, that's a good. It's always good to know anticipate the sort of negative comments you're going to get, and also not take them personally too.
Oh yeah.
Which is tough when you're reading some of those.
Well,
things.
right, and so there's you've heard the term "don't feed the trolls." So if you write an op-ed or you have a story written about you, and you go down to the newspaper, the online story comments, and it's blah 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 blah, this is for illegal immigrants and don't have babies if you can't support them. I mean, you pick and choose what you respond to. That's not even maybe worth the dignity of a response. It's definitely not worth an angry response, because then you just get into you just get sucked in, you're just like getting lured in by that troll. But if it's an objection like, I don't understand why they're giving out disposable diapers, this is bad for the environment, why aren't they giving out cloth diapers? Or in my day, I had 17 children and we had cloth diapers and it was great. That's something you can, that's like a fairly respectful comment and a legitimate question that people have that you can answer, and it's helpful that you do. What should I know about journalistic ethics? Can I ask for story approval? There is nothing that you can do to turn off a reporter forever to wanting to cover the diaper bank than to ask for approval of a story before it runs. Really, if you're going to put yourself out there and be interviewed, you're kind of, trusting that they will accurately reflect what you say and so forth. And if you're worried that a reporter is not grasping some point, it's okay to be repetitive, just get back to your talking points over and over again, or follow up after, 10 minutes after your call and say, thanks for talking to me. As I said on the phone, this and this are so important, and, especially if you're worried about, them getting a stat wrong or something like that, just repeat that stat. Or I know we covered a lot, so I just wanted to include this fact sheet just so that if you need to double check anything, just respectfully, that's the way to do it, instead of saying, I want to see everything that you quote of me, and I want to read your story and tell you how to edit it before you, it's not going to fly. Is there a conflict of interest with the report if I advertise with the reporter's newspaper? Absolutely not. But there's nothing that you'll do more to turn off a reporter if you tell them, hey, I'm an advertiser, so you should write about this, or even hint, hint, hint. That'll not go over well at all and probably shut down the conversation. Is there a conflict if my family member works for the newspaper? know, and hey, use it if you got it, if you got the in to make the connection. It's not an obligation that they cover you, but again, it might help you build those relationships. I think that's. I don't know if I left anything out, Allison, or if people have other questions.
Well, those are all the questions that we have written down. Does anybody else have any other questions? If you want to type, I can take everyone off, the folks who are on caller off mute, and if you have the folks who are on computer, if you can type in your questions in the comment box, that would be great.
Yeah, or if anyone has their own tips based on their own experiences, successes, that might be.
What about, I live in a small town, so I mean, I've even made connections with the publisher of the paper. And actually, he's over other papers in the region, too.
Yeah. Yeah, so.
And that has helped a lot.
It's a totally different circumstance for dealing with small daily newspaper or weekly newspaper versus where you can go in and like meet the owner, versus if you're dealing versus if you're dealing with the Arizona Republic or the Boston Globe. A totally different circumstance. And yeah, it's absolutely, that in both cases the relationship is important. And actually there was a question about media sponsorship. And the media sponsorship thing is easier in the small towns because you can get to that decision maker pretty quickly. And the best thing that they like to hear when you're talking about media sponsorship is that you're not asking for cash. That if you lead with that, of course you probably are asking for cash. But if you lead with that and say, we want to be able to promote you as a sponsor. We think this is a really unique thing for you to be associated with. I mean, all we're looking for is advertising space for our annual auction. And then we'll list media sponsor. That's a pretty easy pitch to make to a small town publisher. And then when you get into the bigger media organizations, there's more opportunity for cash or a combination. And they typically will have a community relations person or a promotions department that you can connect with. And that'll be either a fourth or fifth person at that organization to get to know.
Okay, we have a couple of questions. First, Valerie has her hand up. What would you like to ask, Valerie?
Well, I don't have a question so much as just a comment about some other ways that have been successful for us. We have worked with some local magazines that are available free, in front of stores and stuff like that. There's a lot of different local publications that are very well done, and they have a lot of stories about local businesses and local things that are happening. And it helps that I go to church with the publishers of two of them, and so that was my in for it. But they are very happy to, whenever they have space in their magazine, if we write the article, they're happy to print it for us for free. And there's also been some local blogs that when we're willing to go ahead and write the article, they're willing to put it up there for us. And that's been really good about helping, like you talked about, getting our story out there. And, we don't have a huge personal following on social media, but those are some local things that we can do to kind of get our name out there. And that has been really helpful for us.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's about being aware of what all the range of media is in your community. If any of you guys have local patch sites or hyperlocal sites, they're just begging for stuff to write about, and if you make it easy for them, you're in.
Great. And we had a question if you could do a recap of the main title of people at the newspaper we should seek relationships with.
Right. So get to know the reporters and who's writing what, and follow kind of their topics and stuff like that. Follow everybody that you can on social media, including city editors or assistant city editors and stuff like that. But you'll want to get to know reporters you'll want to get to know the editorial page editor and try to like maybe set something up, an initial thing. The person, the calendar editor or the person who handles that, sometimes in this day and age they're juggling multiple hats. But so you want to get to know the calendar editor, editorial page, reporter, and then depending on the size of the paper and so forth, yeah, take a stab at getting to know the editor themselves, or even the owner of the paper, or the publisher, depending on the size.
Great.
And
is there an online site that would help folks as far as writing journalistically?
Yes.
To write in the style that journalists would look for.
Yes, yes. There are many, and I will get some of those to Allison to send out. There are, if you're looking for stuff in terms of everything from search engine optimization to social media tools and so forth, my own internal training site for my journalists is called Digital Ninja School. I know that's very hokey, .com. And it's just, they're open to the public. You'll see all kinds of stuff about blogging tools, engaging with blog comments, social media, Facebook, Foursquare, Google+, Storify, video. A lot of it won't be relevant to you, but that might help you. Another good site is a personal blog by a guy named Steve Buttry, and the site is Steve Buttry, SteveButtry.wordpress.com. And he writes, his blog is all kind of geared towards journalists and editors, tips for them. But it gives you a sense of maybe, if you got some time to kill, it gives you a sense of what they're up against. But there's also tons in his archives, there's tons and tons and tons of tips and training on effective use of like Twitter and Facebook and growing your following and telling your story. So.
Great. Any other questions or comments? And I guess, could you also include on that outline, Matt, that you're going to send what we might need to include on a press release, or maybe sort of a quick recap of what?
Yeah, let me dig around, and maybe I'll even include a sample or two.
Excellent.
Yeah, that'd be great. Okay.
All right. Any other questions? Well, I want to thank you all for joining us, and I especially want to thank Matt so much for spending so much of his valuable time with us and helping us learn more about how to approach and deal with the local media. And,
well, you know, on that handout, I'll include my contact information, so I'm happy to talk to anybody one-on-one. As Allison said, I'm a journalist, but I'm a supporter of the cause. Journalism is also a really small world, so literally, if you're in a market where, you know, we own 75 daily newspapers across the company, so if you're in a market where we are, I will help you get in. And if you're in a market where I know people, which is quite a bit too, I'm happy to help you network. So.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.